Operation Prime Chance. Have you ever caught someone in a lie so blatant that you almost have to respect the audacity? Like a coworker saying he's too sick to come in, only to see he's been on Elden Ring the past 6 hours. Yeah. That's essentially what happened in the Persian Gulf in September of 1987, except it was the entire Iranian government, and instead of a video game, it was a ship full of some big-ass naval mines. To set the stage here, Iran and Iraq had been at war with each other since 1980, and by 1987, the fighting had spilled into the Persian Gulf. Iran had been secretly laying mines in international shipping lanes to disrupt Iraqi oil tankers and anyone else doing business in the region. The problem was that anyone else included basically everyone else. Tankers from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Europe, and the United States were also getting blown up, so the United States stepped in with Operation Earnest Will, escorting tankers through the Gulf. But that's only what the public was told. Behind the scenes, there was a covert companion mission called Operation Prime Chance. Prime Chance was pretty wild. The US basically leased 2 commercial oil barges, slapped them in the middle of the Persian Gulf, and turned them into floating special operations bases. Each barge had a Navy SEAL platoon, Little Bird helicopters, patrol boats, and explosive ordnance disposal teams, all sitting out there just waiting for Iran to make a move. On the 21st night of September 1987, a trio of Army AH-6 Little Bird helicopters launched off of one of the barges to shadow a suspicious Iranian ship called the Iran Ajar. The lead helicopter had a long-range thermal camera and literally recorded footage of the Ajar's crew physically rolling mines off the deck and into the water right next to a navigational buoy used by tankers. The helicopters were ordered from command to stop the mines from being laid by all means necessary. So, the Little Birds flew up close and opened up with miniguns, riddling the ship with gunfire. The Iranian crew scrambled for cover, and the helicopters, eventually running low on ammo, pulled back to rearm. So all good, right? Situation handled? Wrong. When the helicopters returned, just 30 minutes later, the crew of the Iran Ajar had already gotten back up and resumed laying mines, likely after a quick change of their pants. These guys were just out there continuing their shift like nothing happened. So, the Little Birds unleashed a sustained barrage of rockets and minigun fire this time around, killing 3 crew members and sending the remaining 26 scrambling overboard or surrendering. The next morning, Navy SEALs boarded the crippled ship. On deck, they found 9 mines ready to deploy, along with mine-laying equipment. But the real prize was a logbook documenting every single mine-laying operation the ship had conducted, complete with maps showing exactly where each mine had been placed. After collecting everything of intelligence value, the Navy towed the Ajar out to deep water and blew it up. Iran's response? They literally denied everything. Their president went to the United Nations and flat out denied the ship had been laying mines, even calling the whole thing unprovoked American aggression. Despite the video footage, the mines physically sitting on the deck, the logbook, and the 26 captured crew members saying otherwise. I mean, a bold strategy, I guess. Operation Merlin. It's the late 1990s, and the CIA is losing sleep over Iran's nuclear program. They know Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons, and they want to slow them down without, starting a war. So somebody at the CIA's Counter-Proliferation Division cooks up what they believe to be a genius plan. They're going to hand Iran the blueprints for a critical component of a nuclear warhead, but the blueprints will be deliberately botched. The idea was that Iranian scientists would follow the plans, waste years of research, burn through resources, and ultimately build a device that would never work. The CIA called it Operation Merlin. The component in question was called the TBA-480 fire set, basically the triggering mechanism that initiates the nuclear chain reaction. Without a working fire set, you don't have a bomb. You just have a very expensive and very radioactive ball of metal. The CIA had experts at a national laboratory carefully modify real Russian blueprints, inserting a critical flaw that they were confident Iran would never detect. Now they just needed a delivery man. Enter our unnamed Russian defector. This guy was a legitimate former nuclear scientist who had emigrated to the US and was being paid about $5,000 a month by the CIA. His job was to pose as a disgruntled Russian engineer looking to sell secrets to the highest bidder. There was just one tiny, insignificant, completely inconsequential problem. The CIA didn't tell him the blueprints were fake. So our Russian friend sits down with the plans to familiarize himself with what he's selling and almost immediately notices that critical parts from the parts list don't match the schematics. Also, the parts list was partially written in English. He's supposed to be a Russian scientist selling Russian designs. And the parts list is in English. He mentions this to his buddies at the CIA and essentially says, hey, the Iranians are going to notice this immediately. the CIA told him to relax, to explain away the discrepancies, and to stick to the plan. In March of 2000, the Russian flew to Vienna to deliver the blueprints to Iran's representative at the International Atomic Energy Agency. The plan was for him to meet the guy face to face and sell the whole act. Instead, he walked up to the building, shoved the envelope through a mail slot, and bounced. Didn't even go inside. But here's where it gets really good. He also slipped a handwritten note into the package, specifically pointing out the parts that didn't add up. The man literally handed Iran the answer key to the problem. Now, even if everything had gone according to plan, things still wouldn't have been great. Iran had already acquired similar nuclear blueprints from a Pakistani black market network, so now they could compare the two sets of plans side by side. Once they identified the planted flaw, they could simply ignore it and extract genuinely useful information from the rest of the designs. Nuclear experts would later point out that the component the CIA chose to sabotage was actually about 20 years more advanced than anything Iran had at the time, meaning the US may have inadvertently given Iran a significant technological boost. The CIA had set out to trick Iran into building a broken bomb and may have instead handed them a shortcut to building a real one. Operation Merlin was eventually exposed in 2006 when a former CIA officer leaked the details to a New York Times journalist. That officer was convicted of espionage and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The operation itself, generally regarded as one of the most spectacularly counterproductive covert operations in CIA history. Nice. Operation Olympic Games. It's 2006 and Iran's nuclear program is picking up speed, likely with the help received from our previous story. This is mostly happening at the Natanz Enrichment Facility, an underground complex about 150 miles south of Tehran. Inside, thousands of centrifuges are spinning uranium at insane speeds to enrich it for potential use in nuclear weapons. These centrifuges are incredibly delicate. They spin so fast that even the slightest wobble can tear them apart. Normally about 800 breakdown per year just from regular use. Remember that number. The US administration needed a way to speed up that number, and ideally without the Iranians ever knowing. Enter Operation Olympic Games, a joint US-Israeli cyber operation so classified that only a handful of people in either government knew it existed. It's widely assumed that the US National Security Agency and Israel's Unit 8200 teamed up to build a piece of malware so sophisticated that cybersecurity experts would later call it the most complex digital weapon ever created. Here's the thing about Natanz, though. The facility's computer systems aren't connected to the internet. It's what's called an air-gapped network, completely isolated from the outside world. You can't just email them a virus and call it a day. You need to physically get the malware inside the building. According to reports, a Dutch intelligence agent posing as a technician managed to introduce the virus via an infected USB drive. Just a thumb drive plugged into any computer in there, and the most heavily guarded nuclear facility in Iran would be compromised. Once inside, the so-called Stuxnet virus went to work. The virus targeted the Siemens-branded machine controllers that operated the centrifuges. It would subtly alter the spin speed, pushing them to rotate way faster than designed, then abruptly slowing them down. This repeated stress caused the centrifuges to vibrate, crack, and eventually tear themselves apart. While it was destroying the centrifuges, Stuxnet was simultaneously feeding completely normal readings back to the monitoring systems. So the operators sat there watching their screens, seeing everything running perfectly, while the machines behind the glass were slowly deteriorating. Iranian scientists were losing their minds. Centrifuges were failing at an unprecedented rate, and nobody could figure out why. They replaced equipment, fired staff, and ran diagnostics. Nothing. The facility went from the expected 800 annual failures to nearly 2,000 in a single year. Estimates guess that a fifth of Iran's entire enrichment capacity was quietly chewed up and spat out thanks to that piece of code. Stuxnet operated undetected for over a year before it was accidentally spread beyond Natanz. By 2010, cybersecurity researchers in Belarus stumbled across the code, and what they found blew them away. The virus exploited 4 separate zero-day vulnerabilities simultaneously. A zero-day vulnerability is basically a major flaw in a piece of software that has never been caught by its designers, meaning it can't be easily detected or countered. Most sophisticated government halting-level attacks only need one, and Stuxnet used 4. It had been meticulously tailored to attack one specific type of system in one specific facility in one specific country. The analysts who dissected it described it less like malware and more like a precision-guided munition. And neither the United States nor Israel has ever officially admitted to creating Stuxnet, though officials from both countries have been caught smirking when asked about it. Estimates suggest the operation set Iran's nuclear program back by at least 2 years, and some analysts believe it helped push Iran to the negotiating table for the 2015 nuclear deal. Not bad for a thumb drive.